All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Devstream 131 breakdown. We have a lot to talk about today. Some of it good, some of it exceedingly confusing, but it's been a while since there's been a Devstream, so at least there's a lot of it. First and foremost, very briefly, they talked about some Empyrean phases. Basically, they just broke down how Empyrean is going to release. First, there's going to be the dry dock, and then we were going to actually get the missions, and then there is a mysterious find answers part to the Empyrean release schedule. So that is the order in which it will be released. We will get the dry dock first for the clan and things, and then we will have time to research it and such, I would assume. And then it will properly come out, and we will get to play it, and then some other thing will happen, which is likely going to be quest-related and story stuff. If I had to take a guess, of course. With that, we got a little bit more information on Kuva Lich stuff. We do have this here. This little... Basically, they have an internal, like, Kuva Lich generator that just generates liches, and you can see some of the attributes that they can have. There is one attribute that is not listed on this screenshot, which is an oddity. So basically, they can have, like, a weird quirk. Some of the examples were, like, is afraid of children, has horrible balance, and these things will affect how the Kuva Lich interacts with your character and the things around them. Probably by being afraid of your operator and by falling over a lot will probably be the two things there for those two. So that was somewhat interesting to see, but much more importantly, the Kuva Liches are going to have weapons that you can get, and there's a few things about these weapons that are going to be unique, in that they are going to be able to go past rank 30. They will have no MR attached to them, and they will have special attributes based on the Kuva Lich that you get them from. So in this case, there is a Kuva Scythe, and it will have the bonus as listed. In this case, it would be cold damage on the Scythe inherently. It'll have unique properties based on that. And because these are randomly generated enemies, there's going to be a whole lot of weapons that are very likely to just be strictly better versions of the weapons as they are in the game. There were things like the Comb, the Brack, and the Quartak, and the Ogress, and tons of weapons like that. And they're just Kuva, and then the name of the weapon as normal. So they're just going to be variant weapons that you can go for that are likely to be much better than the regular weapons. And it's a good thing these don't have MR, because if they did, we'd all be MR 30 whenever this releases, almost assuredly, given how many variations there are likely to be. Moving on from the Kuva Lich stuff, which does seem cool, we have some Melee 3.0 stuff with some news about what's coming. Stance reworks are going to be coming at the end of the month. This is going to change the stances to be more like Wukong stances and hopefully flow much better. I will be doing a big video on that, on all of the important stances, on if they were like nerfed or buffed or what's happening. So that'll be very interesting. That is coming at the end of the month, along with a main line that will contain other things that we'll talk about as we go. But most interesting to me is that combo is going to get removed. However, Steve said that melee will do more damage. I personally do not believe that. I have exceedingly low expectations for removing combo, increasing the damage and power of our melee weapons. I think that is extremely unlikely, and I think combo is a good thing to have in the game for melee weapons. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully not awful, but we'll find out. And then aside from that, we are going to be getting Exilus weapon slots. So basically, you are going to be able to get an upgrade for your primary and secondary weapons. It's not coming to melee just yet, where you are going to be able to open up an Exilus slot for those weapons and be able to put Exilus mods in those weapons. Here's the thing about that. Primary and secondary weapons are already stretched really far for Forma, and if these mods aren't going to also be changed to have no cost, it's just you have to open the slot up and then you get a utility mod, essentially, I'm not going to form my weapons more for this type of thing. Like, it's already a stretch if it's worth it to do this on your Warframe. And even then, most of the time, it's not worth it. Doing this on all of like 400 weapons sounds absolutely awful. Like, I can't think of much that I would want to do less than that. Less than forming like 300 items again, just so I can fit a utility item. It sounds absolutely awful in every way that I can realistically think about. So hopefully some changes to mod costs come in to make it so that this is not a terrible, terrible experience where you just have a slot that you'll never use, because that sounds not good. Besides that, and considerably better than getting an Exilus weapon slot, we are going to be getting more appearance and loadout slots. This is, of course, subject to change, but on the dev build, they were 20 plat per slot. So if you want a ton more looks for your favorite Warframe, you can now put some platinum into the game and get up to 3 additional appearance slots or loadout slots for that Warframe. This is exceedingly welcome because some Warframes just have a ton of looks that you'd want to keep and switch between all the time. And this is especially good because, of course, we have the look link and the mod link. So if you just want to like save a build and like there's a million applications for this, and it's all good. Being able to pay some platinum to get some more slots for our favorite things is strictly very good in my opinion, and that is wonderful. In addition to that, other great things that are coming, we are getting some Halloween stuff, and that is going to be a bat ephemera, which is going to be coming on Halloween, or very near to Halloween, and we are going to have a long survival that is going to award us the bat ephemera. Looks super nice. It's just a bunch of bats coming out of you, as you might imagine. And then in addition to that, there is going to be a new breed of Kavat and a new type of Kavat enemy, which are vampire Kavats. So these are going to be out in the plains. And the way to get them is connected to having your regular Kavat with you and having it get bit by one of these vampire Kavats. And then what happens from there is unclear, as they basically just dropped the hint that that would basically be what would need to be done. And they're only going to appear at night. What this new Kavat is going to do, we do not know, but I am interested to find out if it could be better than the Adarza or the Smita, because obviously the Adarza's pretty good, and the Smita has applications. So, with that, we have a little bit more to talk about, and by a little bit more, I mean a lot more, because there's literally an entire other page of notes, but from here on out, we're basically going to be talking about new Warframe stuff, and what I mean by that is we have some Titania buffs that are coming with her Deluxe, and we have Grendel's Release. So Grendel's Release, very quickly, is going to be coming with those melee changes, so he is going to come out. I'm fairly certain they said he's going to come out with his signature melee weapon. So that will be at the end of the month. And in addition to that, we have the Titania buffs that are coming with her Deluxe. So these are pretty low-level buffs on the surface, but like based on what they said, that's actually probably going to make a rather significant difference for Titania. Which is that Razorflies are going to be able to collect your tribute buffs, which makes those way better because you yourself do not have to collect them. And you are going to get raw damage reduction instead of only reflecting damage on one of those buffs. So raw damage reduction is considerably better than reflecting damage because reflecting damage is absolutely useless and damage reduction is absolutely extremely useful. So that is a fantastic change for one of those buffs. Will make it actually worth picking up. Also, all of her abilities except for like transforming into her 4 are going to be sped up and no longer be full body animations. So that is also a nice thing for Titania. So that is all good things for her. Hopefully it works out well. And then aside from that, we have a really, really big thing to talk about, and that is both Ember and Vauban reworks. So we have the Ember rework here, and I'm going to preface both of these reworks with they said that they are works in progress. I'm going to take at least a little bit of this with a grain of salt and hope that it will turn out good. Please. But let's begin. So, Ember passive is being changed to a 5% strength buff per enemy on fire within 10 meters, which is not very useful at all because 10 meters is an extremely low distance in Warframe, where this will maybe at absolute best be giving you 20 to 30%. Usually those enemies are going to be dead immediately if you're playing Warframe. So not very useful at all. Her 1 looks considerably nicer. The visual upgrade, A+. And she's going to be able to throw the fireballs faster. Will that be useful? Kind of depends on if this ability is getting a like 300x damage buff, which we do not know yet because the numbers are not final. And then her 2 is being completely replaced, which is weird because her 2 was fine with this passive ability where you turn it on as an energy cost to turn on, and then you get a meter, much like Nidus's meter, that fills as you use your 1 or 4. It does fill at a constant rate regularly, but your 1 and your 4 will speed up the rate it fills, so they effectively fill it. With this, it's going to give you 50% base damage reduction, and it'll build as you get more meter. And it also seems to build damage based on what we were seeing. But if you are to fill this meter entirely, you will explode and lose all of your energy. I do not know why there is a downside to this ability. I also do not know why this is not her passive. It makes nearing 0 sense to me to not have this be her passive and completely exclude the you blowing up and like losing all of your energy thing, and simply make it so that over the course of the mission you heat up more and more and you get better and better as you heat up, which makes considerably more sense for Ember. And then just keeping accelerant so that your fire does more damage and you have an on-command stun as a panic move. With that, her 3 is changing. It no longer has a duration or like a constant AoE in an area. And it does strip armor now, but all fire damage also strips armor now. We'll get to that in a moment. This knocks enemies super far away and is really messy. And it dumps your 2 meter, seemingly to have a synergy where you absolutely must press 3 to dump meter. Otherwise, you will lose all of your energy and explode. The explosion is supposed to do a lot of damage, but nothing is worth your entire energy pool. And I do mean pretty much nothing. Like, actually, probably actually nothing. So there's that. Her 3 seems like a necessity of her 2 being kind of bad, in that you have to use her 3. You are forced to do so that your meter does not fill up and you basically will die after that happens if any enemy looks at you, because your 2 for your damage reduction and your extra damage is off now and you have no energy to recast it, so welcome to death. That's basically what that sounds like. You're forced to use your 3, which is considerably worse than just having a better ability. Like, say for example, if your 2 was instead just a passive and she still just kept accelerant, and then you were rewarded for building a ton of meter by having a 3 that spends your meter for a benefit, instead of being forced to spend your meter so that you don't get a massive, hilariously overbearing downside. That would make considerable more sense to me, but moving on. She also has a 4, which is still called World on Fire as far as I know, but I'm going to call it Meteor because you just meteor strike. It's basically described as enemies that you can see get hit with a meteor and they get a sticky fire debuff on them that is constantly burning them to death. And if they get near anyone, it will spread to those enemies and then burn them to death, which is extremely, extremely cool. The animation is fucking fantastic. I love everything about this meteor ability and it changing World on Fire from being this extremely passive, lame ability that they almost certainly do not want to continue to be in the game, to being this extremely active, super high damage, hopefully, ability that creates a debuff on enemies. And also it seemed to do like a reasonable amount of damage, and hopefully like the damage will get higher as it spreads more and things like that. But all this stuff is made good by the fire proc changes. So fire procs are going to be changed to stack damage more actively and just basically just stack better, much more like slash procs. And they're also going to, thematically of course, melt armor away as they are on enemies. That is super, super useful. Having fire damage be one that can get rid of armor is just a value add. That buffs a number of other Warframes like Nezha, for example, albeit only minorly. And of course, Gauss, very new, who can do many fire procs. That is also quite good for him, although of course he doesn't really need it due to the new buffs to his 3, changing that quite a bit. There will be a new Gauss video soon as well for anyone who was wondering that after his massive buffs that he received. So there's all that stuff. I'm basically left with looking at the Ember changes and kind of simply being confused a little bit. Because Meteor seems awesome. Seems awesome as long as it does tons of damage. It seems like a very active, really cool ability to be raining down hell on your enemies. Awesome. The one was expected to stay the same. It's a very simple ability that's like better for new players to be like, okay, we shoot fire. That's neat. Cool. And with the new fire procs and stuff, and maybe with building up with your meter, it could do enough damage to actually be relevant, perhaps. I'll take that for what it is. But the way the 2 and the 3 are, there's a synergy there, but the synergy is that, like, your 2 doesn't fuck you as long as you use your 3, and I absolutely hate everything about that. Like, Accelerant was a good ability. So, like, just losing that seems really wild. Like, at the very least, the 3 should not have been the one that stays, right? Like, it should have been, like, a meter, and then you use Accelerant to, like, lower your heat, maybe. Just because Accelerant was literally a better ability. It's just absolutely confusing to me, the way that this is structured, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense whenever, like, because this Warframe needs to manage this meter in a way that other Warframes don't need to, but you're not really getting a very large benefit for doing so. Like, it wasn't like you're just, like, suddenly doing millions of damage or anything like that. Like, you're not measuring this meter out for any real gain, it seems like. You're just doing it because you have to. It's not good. Which is a really bad feel. Like, even just watching it, it was not a good feeling to see it used. So yeah, that's unfortunate. And moving on from that, we have the Vauban changes, which the Vauban changes are also a little concerning. Because, and like, these are, they seem to be a bit earlier on in the kind of design process, but they are still very much of concern to me. Basically, his 1 is Tesla, still Tesla. You are going to be able to have up to 4 rollers, though that seemed to be a little up in the air if they can optimize to the point where more would be good. And then you can hold your 1 to juggle them and throw 4 all at once. These are basically little robots now that are going to follow you around and then AoE jump onto enemies and stun them, hopefully. So that seems interesting enough, but not particularly useful, because they seem kind of slow and such. I'm gonna, like, withhold most judgment on this ability because it seemed like the AI for the, like, them rolling around and attaching to enemies and, like, even the animations, like, really wasn't super ready to be shown yet, probably. So I'm gonna hold off on that, on, like, super criticizing it, because those things are just not done, it seems. And they, of course, do damage, and the slight stun is fine. So that one is maybe fine. Probably not actually useful, but maybe it's fine. And then for Mine Layer, it seems like all of Mine Layer has been changed, and one of these 4 things is good. So the first thing is a pull line. So any of you that have played Just Cause 2 and onward, I believe, you'll know about the thing where you can, like, shoot a grapple into one enemy and then shoot it into another, and then it pulls them together. This is that, except for you can also put it on the ground, and then it'll grab, like, multiple enemies and zoop them together. So the pull lines seem more hilarious than actually useful, but that's fine. And then we have a nail grenade, which basically you throw it down, and then it works as, like, a tiny little baby turret that'll shoot nails at very, very nearby enemies, which seemed absolutely and wildly useless. It'll also impact proc them, it seemed, but not very exciting. Then we have a speed boost pad, which is basically bounce, but instead of sending you upward, it sends you in whatever direction the pad is pointing. And this is to increase the mobility of Vauban. But it's unlikely that it would be a thing that I would use, as you can probably just bullet jump and such instead. And bullet jumping and swinging around and, like, doing all that stuff, and also throwing these to boost you along straightaways while you're killing enemies seems like a little bit too much to do. and you'd probably be better served by just doing your regular parkour moves than laying these on the ground. But thankfully, the fourth one is just a strict damage buff that you can apply to yourself and teammates. So you do not have to use the other 3 abilities. You can just have a damage buff that you can throw, which is strictly useful as long as the damage buff is like reasonable. Like it has to be like a pretty high damage buff overall. It's unlikely that we are going to build Vauban as power strength given the changes that we've seen, but who knows what could happen. And then we have his 3. So his 3, I'm going to read this out, and it's going to be really cool sounding. It's an orbital strike grenade. Okay. Looks super cool. You throw a grenade out, and then it arms, and then there's this big animation of it like locking on to the grenade, and then it shoots a big laser from the sky, and it explodes and does damage. Looks cool, is not practical at all based on the current way that it goes. You do like this giant jump up in the air, like baseball throw, and then it takes like probably 5 seconds. That's what it feels like to arm and then fire and hit enemies. It is hilariously slow, and it scales based on enemy level apparently, but it seemed to have like kind of trouble killing some level 200 butchers. So if it scales on enemy level, that doesn't give me great hope for its ability to kill, like, let's say like level 30 butchers, unfortunately. But hopefully the damage is at least good. But the big question I have is, why is it so slow, and why not instead of this big orbital strike, which does look impressive, but the really impressive part of it is the explosion. Why not instead just have it be like you press 3 and you throw this really powerful grenade that then hits enemies and explodes when it is near enough the enemies to hit them. And then you can hold the ability to juggle a bunch of these and rapid fire throw a ton of them. That would be considerably more useful in my opinion, and probably just as cool. So the orbital strike was really underwhelming to me. Like, it is cool, but I think there's a cool thing that would be considerably more useful than it, unfortunately. But then we have his 4, and his 4 seems to be just purely better. So this is Vortex and Bastille combined. So you just simply tap it and you get Bastille, and you hold it and you get Vortex. So inside the Bastille, it's going to buff allies. They didn't really say specifically what buffs that's going to be, so we'll have to see. And it's going to strip armor from enemies, which is useful. Also, as a really cool thing, the vortexes are going to be drawn to each other and combine into a larger vortex. So that's super cool for grouping up enemies. Seems really useful, actually. Unfortunately, usually we just murder all of the enemies instead of grouping them up. But for Vauban specifically, grouping up those enemies is going to be very useful. So there's that. Overall, for Vauban, I'm worried about it. Mostly because it seems like it's a lot of like gimmicky, like kind of like nonsense, like goof troop stuff, which is fine, and I can appreciate that. But the big thing here is that his 4 seems good, but his 3 doesn't seem fast enough to like be able to get the payoff for his 4. Like throwing your vortex and zooping up a bunch of enemies and like throwing multiple and like getting them all to zoop together is cool and all, but whenever you throw your 3, it's too slow to like really use regularly, it seems like. So if it was just way faster, like lightning fast, it would be considerably more appealing for me to use personally. And the Teslas, like, of course I said, I'm kind of withholding judgment on those. But having only 4 seems real weird. Hopefully that can be more like 10, as that's probably better for like crowd control and keeping you alive. Because there's not really anything hyper defensive about this kit, unless the buff while you are under Bastille is like a huge like damage reduction or something for Vauban. Overall, between Ember and Vauban, I am not super enthused by either, which is really weird. Like, considering that we just got the Wukong rework, which is extremely good and very powerful, and we just got Gauss and, of course, the buffs for Gauss that make all of his abilities worth using. and he's just like a good, solid Warframe overall that just does the do. These two kind of lopsided, like kind of slower reworks are just very odd to me. I don't really know. They don't make a lot of sense in contrast. Like whenever you can try, like you compare like what we saw directly with Wukong, the most recent rework, unless you, of course, you would count what just happened to Gauss as a rework, and Gauss, the most recent Warframe. You contrast like what we saw here with those two, and it just ends up being very confusing as to how these two are supposed to have something to do whenever there are Warframes like Wukong and Gauss around. But yeah, hopefully it is actually a lot better on release. Super concerning for me though, personally. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry there wasn't a whole lot of visual stuff. There wasn't a whole lot of like new assets or anything shown on this stream. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope these reworks end up well. I will see you guys tomorrow.